Honestly, I'm just so tired of guys like Arthur and their aggressively popped collars thinking they can just run roughshod over everyone else's lives. I mean, literally, this is the exact kind of petty suburban tyranny that made me start Sovereign Justice in the first place. It just drains you, you know? Let's just dive right into the madness.
Have you ever stared at a $15 master lock and realized it was the only thing standing between you and your sanity? Yeah, me too. It was a Tuesday at 5:30 a.m. in Scottsdale, Arizona. The sun wasn't even up yet, but the heat was already starting to bake the immaculate, violently green lawns of the Desert Oasis subdivision. I was standing in front of the Community Recreation Center, my gym bag slung over my shoulder, a scoop of pre-workout hitting my bloodstream with the force of a freight train. My heart was pounding, my skin was tingling, and I was ready to absolutely destroy some deadlifts. Instead, I was staring at a shiny, silver padlock. It was looped thick and heavy through the brass handles of the double glass doors. Behind the glass, I could see my sanctuary, the squat rack, the dumbbells, and the slightly janky cable machine that squeaked if you pulled it too fast. It was all right there, unreachable, taped to the glass, perfectly centered and laminated, because, of course, it was laminated, was a notice printed in bright red Comic Sans font. Attention residents. The Desert Oasis Community Gym is closed indefinitely for critical maintenance and safety upgrades. Trespassers will be fined. The HOA Board. I blinked. I wiped the sweat off my forehead. I read it again. Critical maintenance? I was in this gym yesterday. There was nothing wrong with it. Sure, the air conditioning unit rattled a little bit when it kicked into high gear, and maybe the foam on the leg press machine had a tear in it from where Dave from down the street dropped a protein shaker, but it was functional. It was fine. It was ours. I jiggled the handle. The chain rattled aggressively against the glass, echoing in the quiet suburban morning. Hey, no loitering! I turned around. Marching up the pristine concrete sidewalk was Arthur. Arthur was the president of the Desert Oasis Homeowners Association. He was a man who looked like he had been manufactured in a factory that only produced golf course villains. He was aggressively tan, entirely too vascular for a man who didn't lift weights, and he was currently wearing a pastel pink polo shirt with the collar popped up to his earlobes. He had a clipboard tucked under one arm. At 5:30 in the morning. Arthur, I said, my voice dangerously calm, the caffeine making my hands shake. Why is there a padlock on the gym? Arthur stopped a few feet away, hooking his thumbs into his braided leather belt. He gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Yes, it was the kind of smile a shark gives a tuna right before it bites it in half. Read the sign, he said, tapping the laminated paper with a manicured fingernail. Critical maintenance. I read the sign, Artie. I'm asking you what the maintenance is. Did a pipe burst? Is there black mold? Did someone drop a 45-pound plate through the floorboards? Arthur sighed, a heavy, performative sound that suggested I was a toddler asking why the sky was blue. We are conducting a comprehensive structural review per the new bylaws passed at the emergency executive session last night. Emergency executive session? What emergency? The emergency of ensuring our facilities meet the gold standard of Desert Oasis, Arthur said smoothly. Now, if you don't mind, I have a neighborhood to patrol. Trash cans need to be off the curb by 6 a.m., and I see Mrs. Gable is cutting it close. He started to turn away. I stepped into his path. Arthur, don't play games with me. The gym is fine. Half the neighborhood uses this place every morning. You can't just lock it up without a community vote. Arthur's fake smile vanished. He leaned in slightly, dropping the polite neighbor routine. Actually, I can. The board has discretionary power over all common areas. Section 4. Paragraph B of the Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. Look it up. You're quoting the CC and Rs at me at 5:30 in the morning? I quote the CC and Rs when they apply, Arthur shot back, his voice rising. And right now they apply to you standing in front of a closed facility. It's closed. Period. I stared at him. I could see the pulse beating in his neck. He wasn't just enforcing a rule, he was enjoying this. He was getting off on the power trip. But there was something else. A nervous twitch in his eye. He was hiding something. "Where's the money going, Arthur?" I asked quietly. He blinked. "Excuse me?" "The gym maintenance fund. Every resident pays $300 a month in HOA dues. A chunk of that is earmarked for this building. If you're closing it, where is that money going?" Arthur stiffened. He adjusted his popped collar, a nervous tick. "Funds are reallocated as the board sees fit for the betterment of the community." "Right. And what is the board bettering? The landscaping? The front gate?" Arthur sneered. "If you must know, the board voted to prioritize the renovation of the golf clubhouse. It's the crown jewel of Desert Oasis, and it needs a new mahogany bar and a steam room." My jaw dropped. The golf clubhouse. The private, an exclusive clubhouse that only the board members and their elite little clique actually used, because it required a separate secondary membership fee that cost an arm and a leg. "You're defunding the free community gym to build a steam room for yourself?" I asked, my voice getting loud enough to echo off the stucco houses. "We are investing in property values," Arthur snapped. "Not that you would understand spending all your time sweating in a dingy room. Now step away from the doors before I write you up for a nuisance violation." He turned on his heel and marched away, his boat shoes slapping against the pavement. I stood there alone in the dark, the padlock mocking me. The pre-workout in my veins had turned into pure, unadulterated rage. I couldn't fight him from the inside. The board was stacked with his cronies. They held the votes, they held the checkbook, and they held the power. But as I walked back to my house, a slow, dark smile crept onto my face. Arthur liked to play with rules. He liked to weaponize the fine print. Fine, I thought. Let's play. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even try. My home office was lit only by the harsh blue glare of 2 computer monitors. On the left screen, the Desert Oasis HOA CC and Rs, all 94 pages of soul-crushing regulations detailing exactly what shade of beige you were legally allowed to paint your garage door. On the right screen, the Maricopa County Assessor's interactive property map. I was looking for a crack in the armor, a loophole, a way to hurt Arthur where it actually mattered, his absolute control over his little suburban kingdom. My eyes were burning. Plus, I was on my 4th cup of black coffee, clicking through property lines and zoning ordinances until the text started swimming on the screen. Everything inside the red border of the Desert Oasis subdivision was locked down tight. The HOA owned the streets, the sidewalks, the parks, and the gym. They had absolute jurisdiction. I leaned back in my chair and rubbed my eyes, letting out a long, frustrated breath. Maybe he won, I thought. Maybe you can't beat a rigged system. I reached for my mouse to close the window when my cursor hovered over the western boundary of the subdivision. I paused. There was a tiny, weirdly shaped rectangle right on the edge of the HOA border. It was colored differently than the rest of the map. While the subdivision was shaded a light municipal blue, indicating the city limits of Scottsdale, this little half-acre rectangle was shaded a dull, dusty yellow. I clicked it. Parcel ID 214-55-XXX. Jurisdiction: unincorporated Maricopa County. I sat up straight, my heart suddenly hammering against my ribs. I leaned closer to the monitor, my nose almost touching the glass. "No way," I whispered into the empty room. "No freaking way." I frantically opened a new tab and started typing. I was searching for Arizona zoning laws, specifically focusing on municipal boundaries. I read through dense, legalese-filled PDFs, my eyes scanning for the key terms. And then, at 3:15 a.m., I found it. The holy grail of property law. The county island. Let me break this down for you, because it is beautiful. As cities expand, they annex land. But sometimes, yet property owners refuse to be annexed. They hold out. The city builds completely around them, expanding outward, until eventually there is a tiny island of unincorporated county land completely surrounded by city limits. This little half-acre rectangle wasn't in Scottsdale. Legally speaking, it was a ghost. It wasn't subject to city zoning laws, it wasn't subject to city building codes, and, most importantly, it was completely immune to the Desert Oasis HOA covenants. It was the Wild West, sitting right in the middle of a manicured suburb, and it was located exactly 50 feet from Arthur's backyard. I pulled up the property details. It was an empty dirt lot. It had been sitting vacant for 20 years. The owner was listed as a J. Henderson, with a mailing address in a tiny town in northern Idaho. I didn't wait. I found a phone number tied to the property records, and at 8 a.m. sharp, I made the call. "Yeah?" a gravelly voice answered on the third ring. "Mr. Henderson? My name is—" "I ain't selling the mineral rights," the old man barked. "I don't want the mineral rights, sir. I want the dirt lot you own in Maricopa County, the one next to the Desert Oasis subdivision." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "That weed patch? The city's been trying to steal that from me for a decade. The HOA keeps sending me nasty letters about dust control. I use them to light my wood stove." "I hate that HOA as much as you do, sir," I said, leaning forward, gripping the phone. "How much to take it off your hands? Cash, fast close." Another pause. I could hear a dog barking in the background. 40 grand, Henderson said. And you handle the paperwork." 40 grand. It was almost my entire life savings. It was the money I had been saving for a down payment on a rental property. It was a massive, irresponsible, completely insane amount of money to spend out of pure spite. "Deal," I said, without a second of hesitation. 2 weeks later, the deed was recorded in Maricopa County. I was the proud owner of half an acre of dead weeds, broken glass, and unrestricted freedom. It was time to build. I mean, look, buying half an acre of radioactive-looking dirt in the Arizona sun is one thing. Actually turning it into a monument of pure, unadulterated spite is a whole different beast. I needed a guy. You know the type of guy I'm talking about. Not a corporate contractor with a pristine clipboard and a branded hard hat, no. I needed a guy whose blood pressure physically spiked at the word permit. Enter Mike. Mike was a general contractor who looked like he had been carved out of a piece of beef jerky. He drove a 2004 Ford F-25. Oh, that sounded like a dying tractor. He chewed a brand of tobacco that I'm pretty sure was outlawed in the 90s, and he had a deep, spiritual hatred for homeowners associations. I literally found him on a forum for disgruntled off-grid builders. We were standing out on my new weed-choked kingdom at 7 in the morning. The sun was already starting to bake the back of my neck. Mike unrolled a massive sheet of blueprints across the dented, sun-faded hood of his truck, slapping a heavy tape measure down on one corner so the wind wouldn't catch it. "All right, kid," Mike grunted, spitting a brown stream of tobacco juice into the dust. Let me make sure I'm understanding the sheer lunatic scale of what you're asking me to do. You want to build a 4,000 square foot steel structure. Here, 50 feet from that guy's pool. He pointed a calloused, stubby finger toward Arthur's impeccably landscaped backyard, which was separated from my dirt lot by a flimsy 4-foot wrought iron fence. That's exactly right, Mike, I said, leaning over the hood. But here's the kicker. We aren't building a commercial gym. We don't have the zoning for that, and honestly, the county would tie us up in red tape for 6 months just trying to approve the parking lot grading. Mike narrowed his eyes. So what are we building? An agricultural storage barn, I said, a massive grin spreading across my face. Mike stared at me. He looked at the blueprints. He looked at the sprawling, suburban utopia of Desert Oasis right next door. Then, slowly, a raspy, nicotine-stained chuckle rumbled out of his chest. An agricultural storage barn, Mike repeated, shaking his head. On an unincorporated county island. Kid, you don't even need a commercial permit for that. As long as we keep the electrical under a certain amperage and don't plumb in a commercial septic system, the county basically just rubber stamps the structural safety and tells us to have a nice day. Can you do it? I asked. Mike slammed his hand down on the hood of the truck. Bang. I'm gonna pour the thickest, meanest commercial-grade concrete slab this side of the Mississippi. We start tomorrow. And literally, the very next morning, the chaos began. I'm talking earth-shattering, window-rattling chaos. At 6 a.m. sharp, a Mike rolled up with 2 diesel excavators and a crew of guys who looked like they communicated entirely through grunts and energy drinks. The ground shook as the heavy machinery started tearing into the dirt, ripping up decades of mesquite roots and leveling the lot. The smell of diesel exhaust and pulverized desert dirt filled the air, completely overpowering the scent of Arthur's expensive blooming jasmine. It took exactly 45 minutes for the HOA to notice. I was standing near the property line, drinking a gas station coffee, watching Mike scream at a backhoe operator when I heard the frantic slapping of boat shoes on the pavement. Hey, shut it down! Shut those machines off right now! It was Arthur. He was practically vibrating with rage, his face a splotchy, terrifying shade of magenta. Yet he marched right up to the wrought iron fence dividing the HOA from my dirt lot, clutching his inevitable clipboard like a shield. Arthur! I yelled over the roar of the diesel engines, throwing my arms open like I was greeting an old friend. Beautiful morning, isn't it? Great day to move some dirt. What in God's name are you doing? Arthur shrieked, his voice cracking. You are violating a dozen noise ordinances. You are kicking up unmitigated dust. Where is your HOA architectural approval form? I am fining you $500 a day starting right now. Mike, having noticed the commotion, killed the engine on the excavator. The sudden silence was deafening. Mike climbed down from the cab, wiped his greasy hands on his jeans, and sauntered over to the fence. He looked Arthur up and down, clearly unimpressed by the popped collar. Oh, who's the flamingo? Mike asked me. This is Arthur, I said cheerfully. He's the president of the HOA. He says he's going to fine us. Mike let out a bark of laughter. He walked right up to the iron fence, stopping about 2 inches from Arthur's nose. Listen to me, Artie, Mike said, his voice dropping to a gravelly, menacing register. You see this fence? You see this exact line in the dirt right here? Mike drew a line in the dust with the toe of his steel-toed boot. On that side of the line is your little suburban fantasy camp. On this side of the line is Maricopa County jurisdiction. Your fake, made-up neighborhood laws stop right at the tip of my boot. So unless you want to come over this fence and physically stop my backhoe, I suggest you go back to measuring grass blades. Arthur looked like he was going to have a stroke. Yet he sputtered, his face turning from magenta to a dangerous shade of purple. "This is an unpermitted, illegal construction site. I am calling the city. I am calling the police. I am calling the zoning board." "Call the President of the United States for all I care," I said, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "It's a free country. Well, at least on this side of the fence it is." Arthur spun around and stormed off, furiously dialing his cell phone. I knew he was calling the city of Scottsdale. And I also knew with absolute, terrifying certainty that the city of Scottsdale was going to tell him they had zero jurisdiction over County Parcel 214-55-XXX. The next 3 weeks were a blur of glorious, high-speed construction. Honestly, it was like watching a symphony of heavy machinery. Mike wasn't messing around. As they poured the concrete slab, 6 inches thick, reinforced with rebar, designed to withstand the impact of a 500-pound barbell being dropped from overhead. Then the steel arrived. Massive, prefabricated red iron beams were hoisted into the sky by a crane that cast a long, dark shadow directly over Arthur's swimming pool. Every day, Arthur would stand in his backyard, arms crossed, glaring at us. Every day, an HOA security golf cart would slowly cruise by the perimeter. They were looking for a violation. They were looking for a mistake. But Mike ran a tight ship. We had our county agricultural building permits perfectly displayed in a weatherproof box at the edge of the lot. We were untouchable. Then came the equipment. I mean, if you're going to build a spite gym, you don't just buy a couple of treadmills from a yard sale. And I had spent the last month scouring commercial gym liquidation auctions across the Southwest. When a massive big box gym goes bankrupt, they auction off everything for pennies on the dollar. On a Tuesday afternoon, a convoy of 3 18-wheeler semi-trucks came groaning down the road, air brakes hissing as they pulled up to my dirt lot. Mike and I stood there as the drivers threw open the rolling doors. It was breathtaking. 6 heavy-duty, commercial-grade squat racks, 4 Olympic deadlift platforms with inch-thick rubber flooring, rows of matte black dumbbells ranging from 5 to 150 pounds, lat pull-down machines, cable crossovers, leg presses, and enough cast-iron plates to sink a battleship. "Good Lord," Mike muttered, pulling his hat off and wiping his brow. "You really weren't kidding. Well, you're building Valhalla in a dirt patch, Umtsin." "Mike," I said, feeling a rush of adrenaline so strong my vision actually blurred for a second. "We aren't just building it, we're opening it." We spent the next 72 hours working entirely on caffeine and spite. We bolted the racks to the concrete. We laid down hundreds of square feet of interlocking rubber gym mats. We wired up a massive industrial-sized Bluetooth speaker system that hung from the steel rafters. We didn't bother with drywall or air conditioning. This was an agricultural barn. We installed giant industrial swamp coolers and 6 massive rolling garage doors that we could throw open to let the desert breeze in. It was raw. It was brutal. It was perfect. It was time to light the beacon. You see, when I first moved into Desert Oasis, I did something very smart. Before I realized the HOA was a totalitarian nightmare, I volunteered for the Welcome Committee. That gave me legal, unrestricted access to the official community email roster. I still had the CSV file saved on my hard drive. At 8 p.m. on a Friday night, I sat down at my laptop, set up a folding table right in the middle of my new iron paradise, and drafted an email to all 412 households in the Desert Oasis subdivision. Subject: The gym is open. Body: Hey neighbors, are you tired of the community gym being padlocked so the board can build themselves a private steam room? Are you tired of paying dues for facilities you aren't allowed to use? Good news. The Sovereign Strength Mega Gym is officially open for business. And by business, I mean absolutely nothing, because this isn't a business. It's my private property. Puss, located immediately adjacent to the west wall of the subdivision. You literally can't miss the giant steel building. We have 6 squat racks, Olympic platforms, and music that doesn't sound like it belongs in an elevator. The best part? It is 100% free. No memberships, no dues, no guest fees. Just show up, sign a standard liability waiver, and lift heavy things. Open 24/7. See you at the racks. I hit send. I took a deep breath. I walked over to the industrial sound system, connected my phone, and blasted Metallica's For Whom the Bell Tolls at a volume that literally rattled the tin roof. I grabbed the heavy steel chains of the rolling garage doors and hoisted all 6 of them open, flooding the dark suburban night with harsh, brilliant LED warehouse lighting. Then, I waited. I didn't have to wait long. About 20 minutes later, as I saw the beam of a flashlight cutting through the dark near the HOA boundary fence, then another. Then a golf cart pulled up, headlights sweeping across my dirt lot. People were coming. The first guy through the invisible jurisdictional line was Dave, the guy who had previously torn the leg press foam. He was wearing an old cut-off t-shirt and carrying a gallon jug of water. He stopped at the edge of the concrete slab, his jaw practically hitting the floor as he took in the sheer scale of the equipment. "Are you serious right now?" Dave breathed, looking around at the pristine, heavy-duty racks. "Is this a prank? Are we on camera?" "No prank, Dave," I yelled over the music, tossing him a clipboard with a liability waiver. "Sign the paper. The 50-pound dumbbells are on the left." Within an hour, it was an absolute madhouse. As a word spread through the subdivision text groups like wildfire. People who were furious about the HOA's unilateral decision to lock up their amenities were pouring onto my lot. We had college kids home for the summer loading up the bench presses. We had middle-aged moms doing lunges across the rubber mats. We even had Old Man Henderson, who apparently drove down from Idaho just to witness the chaos, sitting on a folding chair smoking a cigar and watching the iron pump. The vibe was electric. It was loud. It was chaotic. And it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. The clanking of iron plates, the heavy bass of the music, the shouts of encouragement. It echoed out into the quiet, stifling air of the neighborhood. And the absolute best part? From the squat racks, if you looked out the open garage doors, you had a perfectly unobstructed, brilliantly lit view of Arthur's backyard. I saw him. He was standing on his back patio, bathed in the harsh LED glow spilling from my mega gym. He was wearing his pink polo shirt, clutching a cell phone to his ear, pacing frantically back and forth. Every time a barbell slammed into the rubber floor, I could see him physically flinch. The residents, his subjects, the people he was supposed to be ruling over, were waving at him from my property, laughing, getting ripped, and completely ignoring his authority. I was the king of the castle. I had bypassed the system, built a monument to freedom, and provided a better service than the HOA ever could, all for $0 a month. But as I watched Arthur violently point a finger at my building while screaming into his phone, I knew the game wasn't over. You don't embarrass a petty tyrant in front of his entire kingdom and expect him to just take it. He was backed into a corner, his authority was crumbling, and he was about to unleash every ounce of state power he could summon. I took a deep breath of the dusty, iron-scented air. Let him try, I thought. I've got the law on my side. Like, I didn't even have to wait a full 48 hours for Arthur to completely lose his mind and escalate things to the nuclear option. Honestly, I was expecting a cease and desist letter taped to my fence, But I guess when you're a petty suburban dictator, you skip the paperwork and go straight for the intimidation tactics. It was a Thursday evening, right around 6:30 p.m. Peak hours. The sun was dipping below the McDowell Mountains, casting this incredible orange glow over the steel rafters of the barn. We had at least 40 people in there. Dave was going for a new personal record on the bench, Metallica was blasting out of the Bluetooth speakers, and the vibe was just, immaculate. And then, the red and blue lights started flashing against the corrugated metal walls. I mean, it wasn't just one cop car. It was 3 Scottsdale police cruisers, completely blocking the cul-de-sac on the HOA side of the fence. And right behind them, driving a little white hybrid city car with amber flashing lights on the roof, was Maricopa County Code Enforcement. Someone near the stereo literally ripped the auxiliary cord out of the speaker. The heavy metal music cut out instantly, replaced by the sudden, deafening sound of a police siren giving a short, aggressive whoop. The clanking of iron plates stopped. Everyone froze, as staring out the open garage doors. Stepping out of the lead cruiser were 2 officers looking completely annoyed, resting their hands on their duty belts. And right behind them, practically skipping with malicious glee, was Arthur. He had his chest puffed out, pointing his clipboard at my barn like he was a general ordering an artillery strike. I took a deep breath, wiped the chalk off my hands, and walked out to the edge of the concrete slab. "Evening, officers," I called out, keeping my voice loud but perfectly calm. "Can I help you?" The older cop, a guy with a thick mustache and a nameplate that read Miller, stepped up to the invisible boundary line. He didn't cross it. Cops know their jurisdictions. "Are you the property owner?" he asked, looking past me at the massive structure and the crowd of sweaty, confused people. "Oh, sure am. Welcome to County Parcel 214-55. "Right," Officer Miller sighed. He gestured to Arthur, who was vibrating with excitement. "This gentleman called dispatch. He stated that you are operating an illegal, unpermitted commercial health club that is disturbing the peace and creating a public hazard." Arthur stepped forward, popping his collar. "It's a nuisance, officer. Look at it. He doesn't have a business license, he doesn't have commercial zoning, and he's running a massive gym 50 feet from my property line. I want this place shut down and everyone trespassing cited immediately." The code enforcement guy, who looked like he hadn't slept since 2018, flipped open a battered notebook. "We checked the county registry," he mumbled, not even making eye contact. "You pulled an agricultural barn permit. Joe, you did not pull a commercial use permit. So if you're charging memberships, you're in violation of about 6 different municipal codes." "I see," I said, putting my hands in my pockets and rocking back on my heels. I looked at Arthur, who had this incredibly smug, punchable smirk on his face. I literally couldn't wait to wipe it off. "Officers, Inspector," I said, turning back to the authorities. "I guess I just have one question. What makes you think this is a business?" Arthur barked a laugh. "Are you kidding me? Look at this place. You have $100,000 worth of commercial equipment in there. There are 40 people lifting weights. It's a gym." "It is a gym," I agreed. "But it's not a business. Does anyone here pay me?" I turned around and faced the crowd of people standing on the rubber mats. "Hey guys," I yelled. Quick question for the police. Did any of you pay for a membership here?" "No," Dave yelled back, holding his water jug. "Did I charge you a drop-in fee?" I asked. "No," a chorus of voices echoed. "Are there any cash registers, point-of-sale systems, or financial transactions of any kind happening on this property?" A kid in a cut-off tee yelled, "Dude, you literally gave me a free protein bar 10 minutes ago." I turned back to the cops and gave them a wide, innocent smile. "You see, gentlemen, under Maricopa County law, I am exercising my rights under the private assembly and accessory use doctrine. This is my private property. These people are my invited guests. We are just a group of friends having a private, non-commercial gathering. No money changes hands. No commerce occurs. Therefore, I don't need a business license. And I don't need a commercial permit. And Arthur over here is wasting your taxpayer-funded time." Officer Miller blinked. He looked at me, looked at the crowd, and then looked down at Arthur. The smug smirk on Arthur's face was rapidly melting into a look of absolute sheer panic. "Wait!" Arthur sputtered, his voice jumping an octave. "No! He sent an email. He advertised it." "I sent an email to my neighbors inviting them to hang out at my barn," I corrected him. "Is it illegal to invite your neighbors over, Arthur?" The code enforcement guy sighed, snapping his notebook shut. "He's right," the inspector muttered to the cops. "If there's no money changing hands and he's not running a commercial enterprise, it's just a private gathering on a county island. Unless he builds a bathroom without a septic permit. I have literally zero jurisdiction here." Officer Miller nodded slowly. He turned to Arthur, and the look he gave him could have frozen boiling water. "Sir," Miller said, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble, "do not call 911 again because you are upset about what your neighbor is doing on his own private property. If you call us out here again for a non-emergency zoning dispute, I will cite you for misuse of the emergency broadcast system. Are we clear?" Arthur opened his mouth, closed it, and took a step back. He looked like he had just swallowed a lemon. "But the property values," he whispered. "Have a good night, gentlemen," I said cheerfully. The cops got back in their cruisers and drove off. The code enforcement guy drove off. Arthur was left standing alone on his pristine sidewalk, clutching his clipboard, but staring at me across the fence. I gave him a little two-finger salute, turned around, and yelled, "Plug the music back in! Dave, let's get that PR!" The barn absolutely erupted in cheers. Honestly, I thought that would be the end of it. I figured Arthur had played his final card and lost. But I guess I underestimated the sheer, bottomless, petty vindictiveness of an HOA president backed into a corner. A week went by. The Spite Gym was thriving. But then, on a Tuesday morning, I walked out to the barn to find Dave standing at the edge of the property line, looking furious. "They towed my truck," Dave said, pointing out to the street. I frowned. "What do you mean they towed it? You were parked on the street." "Yeah, the street inside the HOA boundary," Dave said, running a hand through his hair. "Arthur had a tow truck out here at 5 a.m., and he's towing anyone who parks on the street and walks over to your lot. He says it's unauthorized visitor parking and violates the CC&Rs. I looked down the street. Sure enough, there were fresh skid marks on the asphalt. Arthur couldn't touch my property, but he controlled the roads leading to it. He was trying to lay siege to the gym by making it impossible for anyone to park. It was a smart, dirty move. But it was exactly the kind of mistake I was hoping he would make. I didn't yell. I didn't confront him at his house. I went back into my office, opened my fireproof safe, and pulled out a manila envelope. Inside was a document I had found during my insane 3 a.m. deep dive into the county property records. It was the ace up my sleeve, and it was time to play it. I sent a formal email to the HOA's legal counsel, was requesting an emergency mediation meeting regarding property access. I insisted Arthur be there. 2 days later, I was sitting in the conference room of the newly renovated golf clubhouse, the very clubhouse Arthur had funded by stealing the gym money. It smelled like rich mahogany and expensive leather. Arthur was sitting across from me, flanked by a guy in a $3,000 suit, who I assumed was the HOA's retained attorney. Arthur looked incredibly smug again. He thought he had me cornered. "Let's make this quick," Arthur said, leaning back in his chair and crossing his arms. You surrender your little agricultural building to the HOA, and we will graciously waive the towing fees for your little meathead friends. Otherwise, I will tow every single car that parks within a mile of that dirt patch. Arthur, you're not going to tow anyone ever again, I said, sliding the manila envelope across the polished wooden table. Because you're going to open that envelope and read what's inside. The lawyer frowned, picking up the envelope and sliding out a yellowed, slightly brittle piece of paper. It had a county recorder's stamp on the top right corner, dated from 40 years ago. What is this? The lawyer asked, adjusting his glasses. That, I said, leaning forward and resting my elbows on the table, is an express easement appurtenant. Arthur scoffed. A what? Let me explain it in terms you'll understand, Artie, I said. 40 years ago, before your precious desert oasis was ever built, there was a dirt access road that led from the main highway directly to county parcel 214-55. Well, then when the developer bought the surrounding land and built this subdivision, they paved over that dirt road to create the very streets we drive on today. The lawyer's face suddenly went completely pale. He looked up from the document, staring at me with wide eyes. Ah, I smiled. I see counsel understands. You see, Arthur, when they paved over the access road, the original owner of my lot fought back, and he won. That document is a legally binding perpetual easement recorded with Maricopa County. It legally guarantees the owner of parcel 214-55 and all of his invitees the unrestricted, unencumbered right to use the private roads and visitor parking lots of Desert Oasis to access the property. Arthur's smug expression evaporated. That's impossible. We own the streets. You own the asphalt, Artie, I corrected him. I own the right of way. And by towing my guests' cars, you and this HOA board have intentionally and maliciously violated a recorded federal easement. I stood up from the table, looking down at the two of them. Here is my ultimatum. You are going to refund every single towing fee out of your own pocket. You are going to stop harassing my guests. And you are going to leave me alone. Because if you tow one more car, if you even look at my property funny, I will sue this HOA for violating the easement. I will sue for damages. I will sue for legal fees, and when I win, and your lawyer knows I will win, I will put a lien on this very golf clubhouse to collect. I tapped the mahogany table. I hear the steam room is nice. I'd hate to have to foreclose on it. The silence in the room was absolute. The lawyer was sweating. Arthur looked like he had just been hit by a truck. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He just stared at the yellowed piece of paper like it was a live grenade. I didn't wait for an answer. I turned around and walked out of the clubhouse, the heavy oak doors swinging shut behind me. Checkmate. The fallout was spectacular. Honestly, it was a bloodbath in the best way possible. Once the rest of the HOA board found out that Arthur's petty vendetta had almost cost them the golf clubhouse and exposed them to massive legal liability, they turned on him like starving wolves. An emergency meeting was called, and Arthur was forced to resign in absolute disgrace. I heard he put his house on the market 3 days later. The new board, terrified of any further legal action, quietly went down to the community recreation center and removed the padlock from the front doors. They sent out a very polite, very carefully worded email apologizing for the maintenance delays and announcing the gym was open again. But here's the funny thing. Nobody went back. The old community gym stayed empty, the squeaky cable machine gathering dust. Why would anyone want to work out in a sterile beige room with rules about dropping weights when they could come next door? The Spite Gym, or Sovereign Strength, as everyone started calling it, became a neighborhood institution. We even formed a little committee to pool money for new chalk and cleaning supplies. It wasn't just a gym anymore, it was a community center built on a foundation of pure, unfiltered, malicious compliance. Sometimes late at night, I sit on one of the bench presses after everyone else has gone home. I listen to the desert wind rattling the corrugated steel siding, and I look out the open garage doors at the immaculate, quiet streets of the subdivision. And I just smile, because this is exactly what sovereign justice is all about.